Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with the economic report of the day. Coming up, Nepal faces billions in costs following Saturday's earthquake. And just inland from Cornwall, many struggle with cuts in social welfare. First, the headlines. A firmer Indian currency has come at a high cost for Indian exporters and threatens to derail the government's ambition of doubling shipments. Merchandise exports, which count for 16% of India's $2 trillion economy, shrank for the fourth month in March. On an annual basis, merchandise exports declined 21%, the steepest since 2009. A recent attempt by the Reserve Bank of India to curb the rupee through dollar purchases failed, as foreign investment continues to stream in. And India cannot join the global currency war by cutting interest rates, as it is still fighting inflation. The UK government told British Petroleum it would oppose any potential foreign takeover, as it wants the oil giant to remain British with global clout. There has been speculation of a possible takeover as oil prices remain low and the Royal Dutch Shell just bought BG Group. But as BP still faces billions in liabilities from the 2010 U.S. Gulf oil spill and is heavily exposed to sanctions-hit Russia, it may be a less attractive target. The UK government has limited ability to block a bid, but can intervene for public interest concerns of national or financial security. HSBC's Hong Kong-listed shares jumped 6% after the bank threatened to shift its headquarters out of London. HSBC's $1.1 billion UK bank tax, one of the biggest bank levies, is scheduled to rise to $1.8 billion under the current government. Under Labour plans, the bank levy could climb even higher to nearly $2.3 billion. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority said it would take a positive attitude if HSBC considered moving its headquarters back to Hong Kong. HSBC was considered the territory's de facto central bank before the HKMA was set up. Deutsche Bank on Monday said it would scale back its investment banking and retail operations to close the gap with rivals for profitability. The German lender also said it would strengthen transaction banking as well as asset and wealth management services. Deutsche Bank lowered its target return on equity, a key gauge for profitability, to at least 10% from 12%, despite the cost-cutting reform. The bank's earnings fell by half in the first quarter, a greater-than-expected drop as large legal charges eroded gains in investment banking revenue. Capgemini plans to buy US-based iGate for $4 billion in cash, making North America its biggest market. The French IT services company, with a market cap of about $14 billion, offered $48 or a 4.7% premium for every share of iGate. iGate, a technology and services company with strength in the financial services sector, has about 80% of its operations in North America. After completion, North America will represent 30% of estimated combined 2015 revenue of about $13.6 billion. The earthquake that shook Nepal on Saturday has rocked the poverty-stricken Himalayan nation with damages estimated at over $10 billion. And as aid starts to trickle in, only time will tell how this human tragedy will affect the struggling country down the line. I-24 News journalist Daniel Roth reports.
The weekend's major earthquake in Nepal has left more than 3,000 dead and many more thousands injured. Much infrastructure has been damaged, and while hospitals are operating, lines are growing as equipment was broken in the quake, according to the Wall Street Journal. The quake will prove an ongoing challenge in the months to come. A quarter of Nepal's 30 million people live below the poverty line, and the majority rely on agriculture as a means of economic survival, according to CNN. The World Bank says that the average Nepalese worker makes less than $750 a year. Aid has been rolling in. The United States has dedicated $1 million. China and Pakistan are sending military personnel and materials. And neighboring India, partially affected by the quake, was first to respond.
So once we have a damage assessment, which we hope to have done overnight, by tomorrow our endeavor would be to have 5 helicopters positioned in Kathmandu. and 5 helicopters positioned in Pokhara. Their role would be to do the local rescue, to do airlift if they have to, and to do food distribution locally.
Tourism, a vital industry in Nepal contributing to more than 1 million jobs for the 30 million person country, according to the report from Bustle.com, may be hit hard. Home to important sites reduced to rubble, including Darahara Tower and Durbar Square. More than 300,000 tourists were in Nepal at the time of the quake, according to Reuters. As the Nepalese government finds itself overwhelmed and residents and visitors take up in tents in open areas, international NGOs have stepped in to help.
What we are hearing from the media, various other reports and the United Nations is that there seems to be a very high number of injured, casualties and people still trapped under the rubble. There will be a lot of work for us to do to help everyone.
Although inadequate monsoons this year and ongoing political upheaval had already put a damper on Nepal's GDP, the country's growth jumped to over 5% in fiscal year 2014. This was up more than 1.5% from the previous year. For the time being, though, Nepal will surely need ongoing support as the destruction and death tolls are surveyed.
We're joined now in the studio by Asia business expert Tal Reshef for a look at the situation in Nepal. Mr. Reshef, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Nepal was already in a difficult situation economically before the earthquake hit. How does this impact the Nepalese economy? Can you give us some more numbers, figures?
Well, it hurts it in the most severe way because Nepal was finally catching up a little bit on the last years, having a 5% growth last year and being expected to have more this year in 2015. And now they have to struggle against a tremendous fall in tourism, which is a very central source of income. If the infrastructures are hurt, any plan for technological development in Nepal will have to be waiting now for years to come. And above all, the great problem is that I don't believe that the Nepalese government has got enough funds to finance all this recovery.
Now, Nepal, for many, many years, has been dependent on foreign aid, initially grants, then loans. Why is it that the Nepalese economy never really picked up as much as other economies in the region?
It's a combined issue. First of all, there's an issue of let's say, way of thinking, of mentality, of culture, which is not in favor of progress, of economical progress, and people are putting their effort in other places. And the second point is that the country in the last decades was torn apart by internal problems, some of them between the Maoist rebels and the army, some of them between different fractions of the government and the royal families themselves. So the country was not pronouncing a good atmosphere for investments, and it was not providing a stable economic plan in order to progress. So, and a part of that, and a part of the guerrilla war and the internal fractions, is there was also the disasters. This is not the first natural disaster that hit Nepal. All of this was always a red light in front of investors and developers.
Of course, also one of the issues there has been that it wasn't very clearly registered where the money goes. To some extent, important infrastructure projects were underfunded. There were a lot of other issues, right? How might this particular disaster, which is certainly much bigger than any disaster we've seen recently, how might this affect or impact Nepal and Nepal's future development?
Well, there's a big question and there's a big chance also behind it, because now Nepal is in a good...
You mean it might be an opportunity?
It might be even an opportunity. It's a bit difficult to say it while people are being buried and burned, but yes, there is an opportunity because Nepal is now in growth. Nepal is in good hope, in good optimism for economical issues. Money will be flowing in from other countries, not from Nepalese sources, of course, but combining all this together, maybe it might be a good opportunity to build better infrastructure and make the money flow into economical, technological investments that will start a new growth for the economy. It's possible.
Okay, well, it'd be wonderful to see if that actually comes to fruition. It'd be very, very nice to see. Tal Reshef, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Franka.
Now to a very different part of the world. Cornwall, one of Britain's nicest holiday destinations, is also close to one of its poorest regions. In deprived towns inland, residents are grappling with cuts in social welfare and are turning in growing numbers to charity-run food banks to survive.
The beautiful coast of Cornwall, England's southwestern tip, is famous for its beaches and expensive holiday homes. But a few miles inland and it's a different reality. This is now one of the poorest regions of Britain. Steve moved here from Manchester 9 years ago when his partner became pregnant. He can't find a job and he gets by on dwindling state benefits.
Since this government, Conservative, well, coalition government has come through, it's got worse. Really has, drastically. I mean, he wasn't perfect when the old government was in, but as soon as David Cameron come into power, that's when it all went downhill.
Steve's unemployment benefit was suspended for 5 weeks when a job centre refused to allow him to reschedule an appointment, so he had to turn to a local food bank to feed himself and his children. He now volunteers there and hears countless stories from others about benefits being cut or suspended for the smallest of reasons.
We just can't survive, eh? We'll have to pay money on rent, we'll have electric, gas, central heating to pay for, and we just can't pay for everything that we have, so we come here every week and get help.
When the Camborne Food Bank was set up in 2009 amid the financial crisis, it provided 140 meals a month. It now serves 10,000. And despite the economy improving, privately funded food banks are appearing across the country. Britain's main food bank trust says the number of people it helps has risen more than 200% in the past 2 years.
We started it as a sticking plaster just to help people through, perhaps they had to have their car repaired, perhaps they had a big electric bill, and just to help them over those hurdles. But it's gone on tremendously from there, and it's almost a way of life now.
This was once a vibrant community. Tin mining provided employment for thousands of people, but the jobs disappeared when the mines closed in the late 1980s. Of the jobs that remain, many are seasonal or are paid less than the minimum wage. Average salaries here are 5 times lower than in London.
We had a major financial crisis some years ago, and I completely understand that that's something that we need to address. But I do think there is a concern from some people in this country that would say that no political party is putting forward many proposals or suggestions to address the basic inequality that's around in our country, and that I think the figures would show has become worse over the years.
The campaign for the general election on the 7th of May is a time to look to the future. But as the clouds roll in and the waves pick up, the rugged beauty of Cornwall's nature is symbolic of this region's bleak outlook.
And we stay near the ocean with some other stories from the media in Media Watch with Daniel Roth. Daniel Roth.
How's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So other stories from the ocean? What else do you have for
us? Yes, the WWF, that's not the World Wrestling Federation, no. It's the World Wildlife Fund, came out with a report recently about the oceans of the world, and that the oceans put together are actually the world's 7th largest economy. It's not a way most people would think of the oceans, and but it's interesting. It's a huge, huge economy when you put it all together.
In terms of the resources that come out of the ocean,
in terms of all kinds of things, it's $24 trillion economy generating $2.5 trillion a year. It's enormous. It includes the resources, as you mentioned. It includes a direct output of resources is nearly $7 trillion. Productive coastline, so the borders of this nation, if we can call it that, $7.8 trillion. It is enormous. The economic potential is huge.
So when the mermaids claim the ocean, then they will be the 7th largest
right,
state, so to speak, in terms of GDP.
It's a joke, but it's also not a joke. It's interesting that when we think about economics, when we think about international trade and the way nation states operate, we often don't think about the ocean as in that game, but it is, and it's actually an example of fairly solid. Of course, there's pirates. Of course, there's all sorts of problems, but it's an example of fairly solid cooperation.
Just for clarity's sense, also here, obviously we're talking about the area outside of the sea region, so to speak, that belongs to every country. We're talking about the area that's in between that really doesn't belong to anyone.
This is exactly, and so when we think about this as territory that partly belongs to nations and partly belongs to everyone, it's this really great example of international cooperation. Now, the WWF report also takes pains to explain this will all be lost unless we focus on environmental cleanup, unless we take care of it. This economy will be gone.
This is also the tragedy of the commons, obviously, because it is a common source of wealth, so to speak, and why should we care? You clean it up, right?
Exactly. Now, environmental degradation is across the board, and we'll have to watch out.
Daniel Roth, thanks for that caution. At the end of our program, that is the end of our Economy magazine for today. Thank you very much for watching us, and do join us again tomorrow for more on the economy.